Om Akhandam Satchidanandam Avang Manasagocharam Atmanam Akhiladharam Ashraye Bhishta Siddhai. I take refuge in the self, the indivisible, the existence, consciousness, bliss absolute, beyond the reach of words and thought, and the substratum of all for the attainment of my cherished desire. So we are studying the Vedantasara, which is basically an introduction to the whole system of Vedanta. And let us not forget the purpose. The purpose is to give a solid foundation to entry into the Upanishads, which are the foundational texts of Vedanta, the root texts of Vedanta, which we will take up. Um, so today especially you will see where a bunch of definitions will come our way. And it's really good to know, have a clear idea of, at least in the Vedantic terms, what is a mind, what is intellect, what's a subtle body, what's a causal body. These things are so precisely defined. What's the ultimate reality? What is God? Um, don't look curious. Oh, yes, I would like to know that. Define God. We already have. The ultimate reality, Brahman, qualified by Maya, is called God. So what do we have in the play so far? We're going to start with text number 61. What are the pieces in the game so far? The ultimate reality, of course, Brahman. That's the most important thing to know. There is only one thing ultimately in Advaita Vedanta, which is existence, consciousness, bliss, and non-dual. Non-dual literally means there is no second reality. So whatever appears apart from Brahman, the way we see the world, it has to be an appearance. It cannot be the ultimate reality. So Brahman, and then Maya. Maya is not a second reality apart from Brahman. Maya, because Maya cannot be said to exist in the same sense as Brahman, and yet it cannot be said not to exist also, because it is the cause of all this universe which we see. Then Brahman and Maya together are called Saguna Brahman or Ishvara, God, the God of religion. And Brahman and Maya together become the cause of this universe. But remember, what kind of cause? A real universe is never produced. So Brahman is never really the cause of the universe. It is the cause of the appearance of the universe. Just like the rope is the cause of the appearance of the snake which we see by mistake. The screen is the cause of the appearance of a movie. None of the characters in the movie, none of the objects in the movie, nor the space-time event in the movie are actually happening there. And the screen remains the screen, but it enables the movie to be played. Similarly, the ultimate reality, Brahman, remaining unaffected, enables the movie of this universe to be played. But having said that, we need to know the details of how this movie comes about. It is still that primordial being, but now we are told that primordial being, Brahman, the ultimate reality, with Maya. Now, Maya has two functions. It veils the ultimate reality, Brahman, which explains, or sort of does, why we don't see it anywhere, why we don't know it at all. It's a primordial ignorance, Maya. That's one function. The other function is more interesting. It projects that reality as this reality. Projects, does not transform Brahman into the universe. Brahman actually does not become a material universe. It is not pantheism. Closest would be panentheism. There's a technical term, panentheism. Um, so Brahman appears as this universe because of the projecting power of Maya. And so Brahman is what kind of cause? Brahman is called the Vivarta Karanam. The without getting transformed itself, it appears as the universe. Like a rope, without actually becoming a snake, appears, seems to be a snake. So like that, Brahman appears as the universe. But the Maya itself is transformed into the universe. Maya is called Parinami Karana, transformed cause, or the cause which is transformed into the effect. So the constituents of Maya, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, actually appear as this universe. How do they do so? The first things which happen are the 5 subtle elements are produced. They are not yet the physical things which we call the universe, but the subtle elements, the 5, they're called the Pancha Sukshma Bhuta or Tanmatra. What are they? What are they? Space, air, fire, water, earth. These are the primordial elements which are produced from Brahman through Maya. Produce means appear. Brahman appears as these five. They have different properties. How is it that if it is only Brahman, then how are they different? The reason is the difference is caused by Maya. Maya gives different properties, and so we have different names for them. They look different, they act differently. So we have the five elements now. And remember, Maya has a cosmic aspect and an individual aspect. Maya can be subdivided. Brahman cannot be subdivided. It's just one and only one. But Maya can be infinitely subdivided. So each part of Maya is a tiny bit of a speck of ignorance. So that absolute reality channeled through each speck of ignorance becomes the seed for individual beings like us. It's what we experience in deep sleep. So that is our causal state. I, the individual sentient being in my causal state, deep sleep. So those terms were also introduced. Pragya. And these are terms borrowed from the Mandukya Upanishad. Okay, that's what we have got so far. Now, the subtle body will be produced. Notice, what are we? We are Brahman. But when we become associated with a tiny part of Maya, we become what we are in the deep sleep state. That same Brahman, covered by Maya, tiny aspect of Maya, that tiny aspect of Maya, little bit of Maya is called our causal body. Then on top of that comes our subtle body, which is now going to be produced. And on top of that finally comes our physical or gross body, this physical body. So the individual being, the jiva, the sentient being, is infinite reality, consciousness, existence, consciousness, bliss, no doubt about it, but limited by ignorance. So ignorance is the causal body. Then further limited by the subtle body. What is the subtle body? We'll see now. And then finally by the physical body. It's the physical body which is born. It is the physical body which ages and dies. The subtle body goes on from birth to birth to birth. The causal body goes on from birth to birth to birth. And ultimately, when there's enlightenment, the subtle body dissolves back into the five elements and the causal body is dispelled. And so you remain as the infinite reality. That's the plot. I should have said spoiler alert. All right. Now come to text number 62. Page number 62, text number 61. Text number 61. Subtle bodies. So today the subtle body will be produced. Now we are getting to more familiar territory. What is the subtle body? Thoughts, feelings, emotions, ideas, the person which we consider ourselves to be. Whatever I consider myself to be, Sarvapriyananda is mostly the subtle body, the personality. That's coming now. Text number 61. Sukshma sharirani saptadasha vayavani linga sharirani. The subtle bodies are what are known as the linga sharira, having 17 component parts. The causal body, which is nothing other than a tiny bit of Maya, that is one, the causal body. Then the subtle body comes, which has 17 parts. We'll see what those parts are. And then the physical body comes, which has umpteen number of parts with our organ systems and everything. Okay, anything else that I wanted to say? Yeah, so in the waking state, we are aware of all three. We have physical body, and when we look inside, we find the subtle body, and beyond that is the ignorance which hides our reality. All three bodies are available to us at all times. In dreams, the physical body is forgotten, but the subtle body works and the causal body is of course there. In deep sleep, only the causal body is there, is evident. The subtle body shuts down and you have no awareness of a physical body. Only the causal body, which is deep sleep or ignorance, is there. The koshas, the sheaths, there's another way of classifying all this. The pancha kosha, the 5 sheaths. So the causal body is called Anandamaya kosha. The subtle body, which we will read now, is called, or let me give the English translations. The causal body in Sanskrit, Karana Sharira, is also called Anandamaya Kosha. In English, the bliss sheath. Now, the subtle body will be produced. The subtle body in Sanskrit, Sukshma Sharira, is also called the 3 other sheaths, the Vijnanamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha. In English, the subtle body has 3 sheaths in that. The intellect sheath, the mind sheath, and the vital sheath. Sheath as in Sheath. Why sheath? Because it covers, so to say, the Atman. I'm using my words very carefully. Covers, so to say. It really does not cover. Nothing can cover. You see, there's the danger of using terms like sheath, covering. You feel like there are multiple layers of cloth over, and if you remove them, you'll suddenly find the Atman. Not like that. Suppose I say, the pot covers the clay. It's like saying that. The wave covers the water. The necklace covers the gold. Does a pot really cover the clay? Not at all. It is the clay alone. What is a pot other than the clay alone? Does a wave really cover the water? No, not at all. Every bit of the wave is water. Does a golden necklace really cover the gold? Not at all. All it can do is, if for a person who does not know what clay is or gold is or water is, that person will think, oh, it's a wave. Where is water? Oh, it's a necklace. Where is gold? It's a pot. What do you mean by clay? For that ignorant person, the pot name and form seems to cover the reality, which is clay. Or the water name and wave name and form seems to cover within quotes, the reality, which is water. For an enlightened person, just like for us, it's, if you say, look at the pot and see the clay, you'd say, yeah, it's effortless. We know, it's so clear. Look at the wave and see the water. Yes, of course. What's difficult about it? For the enlightened person, look at the universe, see Brahman. Yes, as easy as that. It's Brahman alone shining forth. Shankaracharya says that in Aparoksha Anubhuti. As choicelessly the clay in a pot blazes forth. If you have the pot, you have the clay. What you touch is the clay. What you see is the clay. What you weigh is the clay. There's nothing but clay there for the person who knows what clay is. So for the person who's enlightened, there's nothing but Brahman here. And it's very obvious to that person, effortlessly so. Anyway, but we are going far ahead of our story. Now our thing is to learn about the subtle body, which is very interesting. Our inner private life, what is it made of according to Vedanta? 17 parts. Sukshma sharirani, subtle bodies. Saptadasha avayavani, 17 components, 17 parts. Linga sharirani. Another name for subtle body is Linga Sharira. In Sanskrit, Sukshma Sharira means subtle body, or Linga Sharira. That also means subtle body. By the way, these are ghosts. So if you say, do you believe in ghosts or not? Yes. What is a ghost? According to Vedanta, it's just after the physical body is gone, we are there with our subtle bodies, and that's a ghost. If you go around and say boo to people, then you'll be classified as a ghost. If you are a rather quiet and retiring sort of ghost, nobody will notice you. But that's what you are. That's what we are. The pure consciousness, limited by the causal body, further limited by the subtle body, without a physical body. As long as we are in that state, we are what's called a ghost. All right. Now, what are the 17 parts? Avayavastu Jnana Indriya Panchakam Buddhi Manasi Karma Indriya Panchakam Vayu Panchakam Cheti. Text 62. What are the 17 parts of the subtle body? The component parts of the Linga Sharira are the 5 organs of perception, the intellect, the mind, the 5 organs of action, and the 5 vital forces. So going to be a nice description of our inner being. It's the software within a computer. It's going to be describing what are the apps, what's the operating system, what kind of software you have, what's the antivirus system. All of that is now going to be described within us. Not the hardware, just the software part of it. So what is it comprised of? The 5 sense organs, the 5 motor organs, organs of knowledge, organs of action. The 2 parts of the mind, buddhi, in intellect and mind. It makes the same thing is divided into 2 parts, mind and intellect. Buddhi means intellect, manas means mind. Now, sometimes this inner organ, the mind, will be divided into 4 parts in some texts. Mind, intellect, memory, and ego. You can divide it into 2 parts, intellect and mind, or into 4 parts, mind, memory, intellect, ego. Manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. If you divide it into 4 parts, then the count will go up to 19. You see what I'm saying? The subtle body has 17 parts. If you count intellect and mind as 2 parts. But if you further subdivide into intellect, mind, memory, and ego, you add 2 more parts. So the subtle body will have 19 parts. What's this problem of 19 and 17? Remember, all of this is based on the Upanishads. So one of the Upanishads talks about subtle body having 17 parts. So there's always a struggle to fit everything into 17, because the Upanishad has said so. But often you find, so when Shankaracharya sings his famous Nirvana Shatakam, 6 stanzas on Nirvana, he sings, Mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. I am not the mind, I am not the ego, I am not the intellect, I am not the memory. 4. He has denied. So he is counting 4 there, not 2. So in his count, it would, the subtle body would have 19 parts then. So that's something to keep in mind. So 5 sense organs, 5 motor organs, 2 components or 4 components of the mind itself and the intellect. And then 5 components of the prana, of what is called the vital force. The vital force which keeps the body alive. So when we say a person is dead, in most Indian languages, they will be like the prana has gone. Pran chale gache in Bengali, pran nikal gaya in Hindi. The prana has gone. By prana, we mean not only the prana, we mean the entire subtle body. The subtle body has left. So we say that he is gone, he or she is gone. That means only the physical body is left. There's an interesting distinction here. In the West, we say that he has given up the ghost. What is the ghost? The subtle body. And in India, we say he's given up the body. So he's given up the physical body. It's just the other way around. But the same phenomenon is that the subtle body is leaving the physical body. That's death. Death is nowhere seen as the end. In no civilization of the world, from ancient times till today, around the world, nowhere is death seen as a full stop, except for a completely reductionist materialist. Nobody else, even the most primitive aboriginal cultures, they all see death as a continuation. What continues? Clearly, the physical body does not continue, but the subtle body does continue. Yeah. If you're saying that, Swami, are you forgetting the causal body? The causal body also goes with the subtle body. So you have 17. 5 sense organs, 5 motor organs, 5 pranas. We will see all of them. What are the sense organs, motor organs, pranas, what each of them does. We'll see all of that. And the intellect and mind, 17. If you count intellect, mind, ego, and memory, 19. Now, 5 sense organs. What are the 5 vital forces? Yes, Cordelia is a doctor, so she's immediately zoned in on the life forces. That's what the doctors are trying to keep in our body. So an ER doctor is basically concerned about keeping the life forces within the physical body. So what are the 5 life forces? That's the definition of keeping somebody alive. We'll see. It will all come up. Everything will be talked about, and the functions of each one and so on. 63. The 5 sense organs, well known. Jnanendriyani, Shrotra, Tvak, Chakshu, Jivha, Ghrana, Khyani. The 5 organs of perception are the ears, the skin, the eyes, the tongue, and the nose. Remember, we are not talking about nose and eyes and ears. No, these are the powers in the subtle body. The ability to see, the ability to hear, smell, taste, touch. The physical organs have not come yet. Until the physical body is produced, these things are. So it's very interesting. In the subtle body, these powers are there. These capacities are there in the subtle body. And they connect to the physical body, the apparatus, the hardware. So this is part of the hardware, these eyes, this nose, these ears. But what we are talking about here, the sense organs, they are not the physical organs here. They are the capacities in the subtle body which will work through this. So This is quite clear from a Vedantic perspective. This part makes it very clear that when the ancients were talking about 5 sense organs, they were not actually talking about the physical organs. Here, the physical organs have not yet come at all. Their physical body has not yet been produced. Already, they're talking about eyes, ears, smell. These are powers of seeing. Somebody may ask, isn't it very anthropomorphic? The 5 sense organs of human beings only. Correct. And you will see throughout the book, it's pretty much about you. So there wouldn't be detailed descriptions of the universe, of plants and animals. No. It's mostly a description of us. Just defining and clarifying what we are, just drawing a picture of what we are according to Vedanta, and then hurrying back towards the real nature, which is Brahman. So the point of this is to enable us to use Vedanta to realize, to become enlightened, not as a scientific description of the universe. So if some other animals have 2 sense organs, or some other animals have 6 or 7 sense organs, that is not of interest to Sadananda, who is writing this text. What he's interested in is us, so that we can, it will help us to become enlightened. The 5 sense organs. Number 64. Etani akashadinam satvikanshebhyo vyastebhyo prithak prithak kramena utpadyante. So where do these 5 come from? These are produced separately in consecutive order from the sattva particles of ether, etc. So Edani, these 5 sense organs, means sensory powers. Where do they come from? They come from the 5 elements. From how are they connected to the 5 elements? They come from the sattvic parts of those 5. Remember, all the 5 elements are produced from Maya, which has sattva, rajas, tamas. So from the more sattvic elements, why sattvic? Because they produce knowledge. Eyes produce the visual knowledge. Ears produce auditory knowledge, and so on. Because they produce knowledge, there must be more sattva in them. Therefore, we infer they come from the sattvic parts of the 5 elements. How? Prithak prithak, separately, kramena, in sequence. So you have to match the sequence. Notice in 63, it was given in a particular sequence. Shrotra. Shrotra means ears. So the ears have the element of space in them. Then twak, touch. So touch has the element of air in it. And then chakshu, eyes, visual powers, they have the element of fire in it. How am I doing this? I'm connecting these 5, the sequence in which it has been given, with the usual sequence of the 5 elements: space and air and fire and water and earth. Then jiva, tongue. It has the element of, tongue means not the physical tongue, the power of taste. It has the element of water in it. And then smell. It has the element of earth in it. So it makes a kind of logic. So they come from those 5 elements in sequence, kramena. Prithak prithak, each is connected to a separate element. Okay. Now, intellect and mind. So these are interesting because they give very clear definitions of what Vedanta means by mind, intellect, sense organs, all of these things. 65. Intellect. Buddhir nama nischayatmika antakarana vritti. Intellect or buddhi is that modification of the internal instrument antakarana which determines. So there is an internal instrument. The subtle body has 10 external instruments, 5 external instruments of knowledge, 5 external instruments of action, and the 5 pranas, which can be seen as a battery pack, which gives energy to the whole thing, which makes it work. And an internal instrument like a CPU. It's pretty much like a computer. So a computer has certain input devices. You have the mouse and the keyboard and the touchpad and things like that. These are all external input device. Why external? Because they are in contact with the external world. But the computer also has an internal setup, like the CPU and the memory, which do not come directly in contact with us. You can't do anything to those things. What you can do is you can do something to the keyboard or the mouse or the trackpad and things like that, or the touchpad. But to the internal setup of the computer, the CPU and the memory, and so just like that, we have an internal instrument. The internal instrument is not in touch with the external world. What is in touch with the external world? The 5 sense organs, the 5 motor organs. This internal instrument has, you can say, either 2 parts or 4 parts. What does the internal instrument have? Intellect, mind, memory, ego, 4 parts, or simply intellect and mind. Buddhi nama, so intellect is, what is buddhi, what is intellect? Nishchayatmika, the determinative faculty. What is it? Always connected to your own experience. What exactly is meant by intellect here? The faculty of understanding. Not just thinking and feeling. The moment you get that aha feeling, I got it, clarity, I have got knowledge. What knowledge? Any knowledge at all. When there is clear knowledge, it is the intellect which is active. When you get the feeling, I'm not getting it, that's the intellect not being able to process. When you get the feeling of, I've got it, a math problem or a solution to anything that you're looking for, any kind of understanding of a concept, that's the intellect. And by the way, these are different functions. They're not physical parts of a subtle body. They are different functions of the inner instrument. Antakarana, inner instrument. They're different functions. It's the same inner instrument, but it functions in different ways. Mind, number 66. Text number 66. Mind. Mano nama sankalpa vikalpatmika antakarana vrittihi. The mind or manas is that modification of the internal instrument which considers the pros and cons of a subject. Sankalpa and vikalpa means all sorts of alternatives. The unprocessed information is dumped there. So the sense organs will pull in a lot of information and dump it all into the mind, and it is processed there. Understanding comes at a deeper level, which is buddhi. But simply the processing which is going on, sankalpa, vikalpa, this or that, there is information, but not yet knowledge. So that entire backroom processing, that is called mind. Emotions also will come here. Feelings, thoughts, possibilities, general random chattering away of the mind. That is the mind. That's called manas. Then 67. Anayoreva chitta hankarayor antarbhava. And in these two, the mind stuff, chitta and egoism, ahankara, are included in the intellect and the mind, manas. So this solves the mystery. 4 parts or 2 parts. So here, see, he still has this bee in a bonnet about fitting everything into 17 parts. And he knows, you're going to ask him, what about ego? What about memory? He says, these are included in mind and intellect. So you can still claim to have 17 parts in the subtle body. But it's important to note, intellect, mind, ego, and memory. These are actually the 4 functions of the inner instrument. So what is the memory? It will define. All of these are defined. Memory is defined, intellect is defined, ego will be defined. Memory. 68. Anusandhanatmika antakarana vrittihi chittam. Memory, chitta, is that modification of the inner organ which remembers. So that function which records or traces left behind by previous experiences of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, feeling, understanding, remembering, forgetting, all those previous experiences, they leave traces. And the capacity of recalling those traces is called memory. Anusandhanatmika, which recalls traces left in the mind stuff. That is called memory. One little note here, in the Yoga Sutras you find Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of the transformations of the chitta. So what are they talking about? Is yoga related to memory? No. There the word chitta means the whole of the mind. There the word chitta means the entire mind. The calming down, cessation of the movements of the mind is called yoga or samadhi. That's Yoga Sutras. Specific meaning of chitta is memory. General meaning of chitta, mind. Whole mind is sometimes called chitta. These are the 2 words. Chit, chitta. Chit, consciousness. Chitta, mind. Important. There's only one takara, one ta is added. Chit is consciousness, Atman, the self, Brahman, that is Chit, pure consciousness. Chitta, one more ta is added, that is mind. It also points to the fact that the mind also ultimately is nothing other than Brahman. It is Brahman alone with an overlay of Maya, which appears in this form. And then, what is ego? Clear definitions, interesting. And these are, remember all this will become useful throughout our study of Vedanta. Simple and direct definitions. What is ego? 69. Abhimanatmikantakarana vritti ahankara. Egoism, ahankara, is that modification of the inner organ which is characterized by self-consciousness. This should be, I don't know what you have got in your book, it should be small s, not capital S. It says self-consciousness. It's not capital S, self-consciousness, small s, self-consciousness. So what is ego? It is the modification of the internal organ which is characterized by self-consciousness, not a particularly good translation. I'll give you a better translation. Abhimanatmika antakarana vritti is, Abhimanam is the appropriating function. The appropriating function is called the ego. What does that appropriating function mean? Whatever is going on in the body-mind, it is taken up, appropriated, and unified by the ego. You're walking is going on, but the ego says, I am walking. Eating is going on. The ego says, I am eating. Is the ego actually eating? Not at all. Ego is just a function of the mind. It can't eat, neither can it walk. But it is the function of the mind is to, this ego, the function is to unify all these activities under one head. And that is called appropriating. It takes upon itself everything that's going on there. This is I. A thought arises in the mind. I want a cookie. I'm sorry, see, the ego is already working. Cookie, want. Then the ego comes in, I want cookie. Cookie comes from memory. Want comes from the mind. And then the ego comes and says, I want cookie. When it comes from the memory, the desire will not be there. But the traces in the mind, they come up and that it hooks that. It's a nice thing, a cookie. It is a thing to be wanted. So want and cookie are present, then the ego comes and says, I want. Then, so remember, it's the appropriating function. In Sanskrit, abhimanatmika antakarana vritti. Function of the same inner instrument. Clearly, it's not the real you. The real you is the Atman, the consciousness. It is just a function of the mind. It works, it does not work sometimes. Sometimes the ego is not present. When is the ego not present? Keep the mind very busy, you will not feel the presence of the ego. You're deeply interested in your work. A surgeon is doing very serious neurosurgery, something very fine work, maybe neurosurgery or something. Hour after hour, does not even feel I am doing it. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi calls this the flow experience. So when you have a flow experience in sports, in music, you're a doctor or an artist or a writer or even a meditator, when you get into the flow experience, the ego disappears. Why? There's a psychological reason for it. The mind has no capacity left over for generating the ego. You have focused it so much on something, there's no capacity left over. When you're intensely playing a game of tennis or something like that, at that time, you're not thinking, I am going to smash this ball. If you think that, you'll miss it. There is no time left over. The mind just reacts. In dance, in martial arts, in sports, in music especially, when you're playing an instrument, you know how to play an instrument very well. You know when it's going really well. And at that time, you don't feel, I'm going to do this next, I'm going to do that. That'll be horrible. You can never play properly if you do that. So automatically it flows. That's where Mihai Csikszentmihalyi got the term flow. The music just flowed. From that he got the term flow. There the ego will not be present. There's no cognitive capacity left over for generating an ego at that time. Afterwards the ego can say, I played so well, I did that operation so well. So that's the ego. It will come in later. But when the ego is not being generated by the mind, are you not there? You are there. In deep sleep, the ego stops because the mind stops. So ego also stops. But the deep sleep is an experience without the ego. One Advaita teacher said a very subtle point. This is one of the doors to enlightenment. These are some of the errors, faults in the structure of Maya. Here is one, a very subtle point. When you go to sleep, the ego also goes to sleep because the mind goes to sleep. None of the mind is subtle body. Sleep means subtle body stops functioning, only causal body is left. So the subtle body, there is no mind, memory, intellect, ego, all of them stop. The four components of the antakarana, they shut down. And this deep sleep. And we wake up. When we wake up, the inner instrument starts functioning. Ego comes up, memory comes up, the intellect comes up, mind comes up, they start functioning. And the ego says, I slept happily. No, you did not. You, the ego, you did not, you were not there at all. In deep sleep, you, the ego, were not there. You're shut down. You did not sleep happily. This deep sleep is something deeper than your existence. You were not there at all. And yet the ego says, I slept happily. That is a door. It's a fault in the structure of Maya. Maya has built up a very nice palace of deceit, but there are some trapdoors. Here is one where the witness consciousness illumined the darkness of deep sleep. It is the ego which takes over after waking up and says, I slept. If you can see the difference between the two, you will see the difference between Atma and ego. Anyway, that was a pointer given by a monk. Where do they come from? Ego, intellect, mind, memory. 70. Ete punaha akashadigata satvikanshebhyo militebhyo utpadyante. So these four, what are these four? Mind, intellect, ego, and memory. They are produced by the sattvika parts of the five elements mixed up. Remember, the sense organs are produced from the sattvika parts of each of the five elements separately. Hearing from space, seeing from fire, touch from air, and so on. But here, all the five elements together, they contribute to the generation of ego, mind, intellect, and memory. So these components of the inner instrument, punaha, and again, akashadi, the space, etc. Satvik anshebhya, from there, satvik parts, militebhya, mixed, compounded together, utpadyante, they are produced, they appear. Why are you stressing that they are all from satvika part, from the satvik aspect of the elements? 71. Etesham prakashatmakatvat satvikangsha. These are all, they are illumined. They shine with awareness. They produce knowledge. Which produces knowledge? Mind, intellect, worldly knowledge, mind, intellect, memory. So because of the knowledge producing ability, we understand they must come from the sattvika part of the five elements. Remember, none of this is physical. All of it is at the subtle level. Then a little bit of housekeeping, accounting. How do you match all this with the five sheaths? Anandamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Manomaya, Pranamaya, and Annamaya. How do you match them? 72. Iyam buddhi jnanendriyai sahita vijnanamaya kosho bhavati. This intellect, along with the five organs of perception, constitutes the sheath of intelligence. Intellect represents that function of the inner instrument, the intellect, along with, if you count with the five organs of knowledge, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, that whole thing is called the sheath of the intellect, Vijnanamaya Kosha. Then 73, an important point he raises. This is where we first time begin to feel like an individual being, each of us. Where? At the level of the intellect. I am. This is where it happens. Not in deep sleep. We have been created Pure consciousness limited by one aspect of Maya that we saw in the causal level. But we have no awareness of ourselves as an individual being there. We can't think in deep sleep. When you think about deep sleep now, what are we there? Nothing. Just an awareness of blankness, but no activity going on there. But for the first time, we are active here. We can think and reflect. So this is where you practically become an individual sentient being. Practically become individual sentient being. That's what he's going to say in 73. Ayam kartritva bhoktritva sukhitva dukkhitva adi abhimanatvena ihaloka paraloka gami vyavahariko jiva ityuchyate. This Vijnanamaya Kosha, on account of its being conscious of that it is an agent, an enjoyer, that it is happy or miserable, etc., is called the phenomenal jiva, the individual self, subject to transmigration to this and the other worlds. Very important. This is where you can recognize yourself. Here I am introduced as something understandable as myself. Infinite consciousness, part of Maya, causal body, none of that seems very familiar to us. We don't feel like that. But this is exactly us. The intellect sheath, the Vijnanamaya Kosha, this is where you feel Kartritva. I am the doer. I is there. Doership is there. I am the knower. I see, I hear, I smell, I taste, I touch. The 5 sense organs are working. Sukhitva, dukkhitva. Bhoktritva means enjoyership or experiencer. I am an experiencer. I see, I hear, I smell, I taste, I touch, I remember, I think, I feel, I understand. All of this is experience. This is what's beginning to happen now. Then, what kind of experiences? Sukhitva, dukkhitva. Pleasure and pain are now experienced and understood. It is at this level pleasure and pain are really understood. Ityadi, and all other kinds of the whole range of experience happens at this level. Not only that, more important, ihaloka paraloka gami. This is the one which dwells in this world, and after the death of the physical body will travel to other worlds, to other lives. It has come on from other lives. This is us, the real us, who are inhabiting this. Now I am Sarvapriyananda, but before this body, I was still there. After this body goes, if I don't attain enlightenment, I'll still be there. I'll come back in some other form. By the way, I was watching this nice documentary. It's called The Unmistaken Child. Unmistaken Child. So it's a beautiful documentary made about 10 or 12 years ago on a Buddhist, on a Tibetan Lama who, so they have, in Tibetan Buddhism, they have the concept of the Rinpoches who keep coming back. In a very, when we are reborn under conditions of ignorance, we have no choice in the matter. But spiritually very enlightened beings who have not yet taken full nirvana, they come back again and again because of the whole concept of the bodhisattva bhav, that they come back again and again to help sentient beings. So these very advanced spiritual beings can actually choose where and how, in general terms, where and how they can come back. So they have a control over their own karma. This is extraordinarily advanced, very rare. You find that in some of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, who are clearly aware that we came from other realms and we're born to help Sri Ramakrishna in his mission as an avatar, and so on and so forth. So the story is of a very advanced Lama who passes on at the age of 84 or something like that in a monastery in Nepal. And his attendant, who is a young monk, a young Lama, who has served him faithfully for 20, 21 years, his disciple. So he's inconsolable, that he can't, so at the time of death, that Lama is telling the attendant, the young monk, that don't cry. I have had a wonderful life. Whatever I wanted to do in this life, I've done. But this Lama keeps on telling, even till the 5 minutes before the passing away, that you come back, please come back. And tell me where I can find you. So finally, this Lama, before passing away, he says, all right, I'll come back. And so there's this documentary. So there's a film crew which follows this young Lama around in his search for where his old master has come back as a new baby. So it's a very interesting documentary. What has come back? The old Lama's body was burnt. They even show the cremation. The body is being burnt. But now what has gone away? It's a subtle body. This Vijnanamaya Kosha. And that reincarnates in another body. Helplessly, if it's an ignorant, subtle body like most of us, or if a very enlightened, advanced master, then with some autonomy. So, I know Swami Ranganathanandaji, the 13th president of our order, would say more than once, he'd say that, I will come back. I will come back again to do Swami Vivekananda's work. So that coming back is not like the rest of us. We come back helplessly under the inertia of our past karma. But that coming back is of a luminous, enlightened being coming back by choice for some higher purpose. I remember a very old Swami, Upen Maharaj, whom he's the oldest Swami I knew. He died at the age of, not the oldest really, he died at the age of 102 or 103. There was another Swami who died at the age of 106 recently, year before last. So this Upen Maharaj, who was a disciple of Swami Shivananda, and at that time Swami Ranganathanji was the president of our order. Ranganathanji also was a disciple of Swami Shivananda, who was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. So Upen Maharaj one day goes to Swami Ranganathananda, the president of the order, and says, "What will become of me?" And remember, both Swamis are above 90 at that time. What will become of me? And Swami Ranganathananda, the president of the order, he straight away said, "This is your last life. You will be liberated upon the fall of this." He said, literally, "This is your last life. I will come back again," he said. "I will come back again." And third sentence he said, but you don't have to, you won't. So these three sentences, "This is your last life, I shall come back again, but you don't have to." And this I heard from one of the attendants. So I wanted to verify it. Sometimes things get exaggerated. So I found this old Swami who was nearly 100 years old at that time, sitting near the Holy Mother's temple on the bank of the Ganga. And I went up to him and asked a few very deep questions. One I asked was, "Swami, I heard that you went to Swami Ranganathanandaji and you asked," before I could complete it, he completed the whole thing himself. He said, "Yes, what will become of me?" And he said that, "This is your last birth. I, meaning he will come back again, but I don't have to come back." Now look at the caliber of this old monk. He went on praising Swami Ranganathanandaji. See the attitude. He does not want final liberation. He wants to come back into this world, to do Swami Vivekananda's work, to spread spirituality, and so on. And I said in a sort of restless hurry, I said, "Swami, forget that. You have been given," I said in Bengali, "Apnake chuti diye raha hoyeche. You have been given a permanent vacation. So isn't that exciting?" And this Swami was not all that carried away by emotion. He just said, "Yes, the blessings of a Mahapurusha, of a great soul. Let us see." About himself, he was not all that worried. Not at all interested, in fact. But he really liked Ranganathanji's attitude that I shall come back and work for humanity, work for Vivekananda's work. But I was excited. I think I was more excited about his impending liberation than he was. I actually asked him if he was enlightened, but anyway, that is a different story altogether. So this is the Vijnanamaya Kosha, which goes from birth to birth. And this is called, important, Vyavaharika Jiva Uchyate, important. This is called the transactional sentient being, individual being. Vyavaharika, transactional. Transactional means for all practical purposes, our individuality starts here. Causal body, deep sleep, Maya, all that, it's too rarefied for us. But what we can immediately understand is this one, which we feel right now. Okay. Then, don't worry, I know there's a lot of activity going on there. I have a plan. So I'll just go a little bit more and then stop. 74. Manastu Gyanindriyai Sahitam San Manomaya Kosho Bhavati. The mind with the organs of perception constitutes the mental sheath. So the other, we're doing some accounting here. What about the mental sheath, Manomaya Kosha? Subtle body has three sheaths, Vijnanamaya, Manomaya, Pranamaya. So Vijnanamaya is intellect plus five organs of perception, five organs of perception. And what is the mental sheath, Manomaya? Mind, five organs of perception. So just a minute, aren't you double counting? Yes, it is the same thing. You count it in this way, it is this intellect sheath. You count it the other way, it is the mind sheath. Just the difference is one function is of the intellect function, one function is of the mind function. And you should take them together with the five sense organs, because those five sense organs dump their information in the mind. So five sense organs with the mind is called the sheath of the mind, Manomaya Kosha. All right, we'll stop here, because organs of action and the organ and the pranas, the battery pack, energy pack, which keeps the whole thing alive and going, those things will come next. All right, before we go on, let me quickly take a look at the activity. By the way, lot of activity here, many comments. What would Sadananda Yogendra say? Don't take all this too seriously. None of this is meant to be taken very seriously. What is the only thing that is meant to be taken seriously? Vastu Satchidanandam Advayam Brahma. The reality is existence, consciousness, bliss, non-dual Brahman. Then Ajnana, the Sakala Jada Samuha Vastu. Starting from ignorance downwards. Downwards means all of this is what? Unreal. It's a movie being played out. Good to understand, but don't get excited about it. The screen doesn't cause the movie. This is Rick, I think. The screen is passive and the projector, which is separate from the screen, causes it. The analogy breaks down because there's nothing other than Brahman. Maya couldn't exist because there would be something existing other than Brahman. Maya can't be part of Brahman because Brahman is indivisible and can't have parts. Your thoughts, please. Yes, it's paradoxical. But remember, in a sense, the screen does cause the movie. In what sense? Not that the screen is making up the movie. The screen is giving substance to the movie. Without the screen, there wouldn't be anything on which the movie to play. We needn't think of an old movie screen. You can think of a modern, plasma TV or something, which is both screen and projector all together. So it gives substance. It gives reality. In what sense is it the cause? Everything in the movie, the actors, the places, the activities are actually, if you just go out and touch them, there is no robber or cop, there is no King Kong, there is no Harry Potter there. Whatever you touch is the screen, is the reality. Reality is only the screen. In that sense, Brahman is the only reality that there is. All right. Now, Maya producing all of this, remember, from an Advaitic perspective, they are not disturbed that it could be a second thing. As long as Maya doesn't have its own separate identity, its own separate existence, a second entity, as long as non-duality is protected, the Advaitin is fine with it. You can call Maya the power of Brahman, the projecting power of Brahman. Upon realization, you realize Maya has no reality of its own apart from Brahman. And therefore, Brahman still remains one without a second. He said, yet, but Brahman is only existence, consciousness, bliss. Why didn't you add Maya to it? Because Maya doesn't have a separate existence apart from that. But Maya is doing all of this. From an Advaitic perspective, is it? In the movie, say, you see the difference between fiction and fact. If you say the movie, the TV is producing the magician Harry Potter and the villains and the magic school, not really. There is no magician there, there's no Harry Potter, there is no magic school there, there's only a TV. But it has the potency of producing a fiction. That much is there. And that is no problem for the non-dualist, because being a fiction, it is not a countable second to Brahman. That's all they're interested in. After that, you can have your fun, as much fiction as you want. But there is no second reality apart from Brahman. Whatever you come across in the play of Maya has to be Brahman. Yeah, it can't be anything other than Brahman. Yeah. If you give more importance to Maya, you give more stress, you will slowly move from the spectrum of Advaita towards something like Kashmiri Shaivism, for example. You give a little more importance, reality to the projection. It's not just a fiction. It's not just a projection. It has validity of its own within the ultimate reality. It becomes more like Kashmiri Shaivism. You give it even more reality, it becomes Vishishtadvaita. It is a part of Brahman, a distinct part of Brahman. Each of us is a distinct part of Brahman. It is anathema to Advaita Vedanta, will never admit it. But qualified monism, Vishishtadvaita, will say actually Brahman has parts. That makes it metaphysically illogical, but maybe more satisfying at our level. Ramya says, the difference between jivas begins with the Sukshma Sharira. Till that point, it's the same, all at Karna Sharira. Important point. Till the causal body, till the Karana Sharira, the difference between us is not experiential, but still the difference is there. So what difference at the level of deep sleep? It's all the same. It's all the same experience. Potentially we are different because the moment we sprout into our subtle bodies, we are very different from each other, which means the subtle bodies existed as potencies, as seed form, even in the causal body. That's the meaning of cause. As seeds, they all look the same. The moment they sprout, they look very different. That means, were they really the same as seeds? No. The DNA was different there. They just looked same. They were not doing anything. But the moment they sprout and start developing, you see difference. That means the difference was already there in a subtle or in a causal form there. So in causal body also we are different. At causal, we as sentient beings, we are different at the causal level. At a subtle level, clearly different. Physical level, here, countably different. You can count. There are 66 people here. Is this the Holy Ghost of Christianity? No, no, no. Don't confuse it with the Holy Ghost of Christianity. The Holy Ghost is a spiritual power which descends from God to all living beings. It's a much higher thing. This ghost is a subtle body. It is actually, there's a term pneuma, which was there in early Christianity, sort of fell out of use. But that corresponds a lot to the subtle body. Pneuma literally means air, vital breath, which is close to prana. Rick says people who have out-of-body experiences during the near-death experience prove that the subtle body organs of perception can function without the physical body. Correct. They perceive things in the operating room, other parts of the hospital, while people are in cardiac arrest with no detectable brain activity. So many things, such things are reported. Scientists will not accept it, but the amount of data is... I actually heard a talk by a doctor, a medical researcher in the Vedanta Society of Dallas. So about the data on near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. I mean, there's such a lot of data, and all of it is suppressed because it doesn't fit with our paradigm that body is everything. Without body, it cannot function. But it shows that it can function. One can still think, and one can see, and one can even experience without the body, sometimes better without the body. Is the experience of death similar to the experience of dreaming rather than deep sleep? No, the experience of death will be like deep sleep. It's only when the subtle body becomes active again, either in this world as a ghost, you go around saying boo to people, or you go travel to other worlds. And we talk about heavenly worlds or hellish worlds for particularly naughty people. So in those worlds, the subtle body again becomes active, and you get a new body then, a kind of astral body. And then you can again think, and then it will be like a dream, not like a deep sleep anymore. But right at the point of death, it goes into a dream, like a deep sleep-like state. The Tibetan Buddhists have a very detailed phenomenology of death and post-death experiences. Call it the Bardos, the Tibetan book of dying, living and dying. That book is there. Shravani says, Swamiji's lectures, he cites Akasha and Prana as fundamental elements after creation, Prana being unity and forces, Akasha being matter. Was it done by Vaisheshika scholars? I think so, because it's not a Vedantic perspective. Notice what is Vedantic perspective is entirely taken from Sankhya. It's borrowed from Sankhya. But the Akasha Prana, I have searched, where was it? It is actually in the Vaisheshika system. Is Antakarana same as mind? Correct. But now we have already discussed the divisions, and now you should be able to say Antakarana means inner instrument. What are the components? 2 or 4, depending on how you count. Mind, intellect, ego, memory. Mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. Ahankara, ego, chitta, memory, mana, mind, intellect, buddhi. If all jivas are similar during deep sleep, is it possible that during dream the Sukshma Sharira can communicate with the cosmic? All jivas are not similar during deep sleep. The experience is similar during deep sleep. It feels the same for everybody during deep sleep. But the potential difference is always there. The seed forms. So when the mind awakens, in dream, for example, now this is a separate question. Can Sukshma Sharira communicate with the cosmic mind? Yes. Just as our physical body is always part of the cosmic, the physical cosmos, our mental bodies are also part of the cosmic mind, part of Hiranyagarbha. So at some level, we are all connected into the World Wide Web. This is a much deeper internet than our computer internet. Sometimes messages and information percolates through from the cosmic mind into our individual minds. Spiritual dreams are such an example. And you'll never forget those experiences. They are not generated at our level. What is the, Prabir Babu asks, what is the difference between ego and reflected consciousness? Consciousness is reflected in the ego. The ego is a movement of the mind. Notice, abhimanatmika antakarana vritti ahankara. We just read the definition. The appropriating movement or function of the mind or inner instrument is called ego. So it's a movement of the inner instrument. What are they made of? Sattvic parts of the 5 elements. Material. They are not physical matter, they're subtle matter. Consciousness or Atman or Chaitanya is reflected in that. Reflected is just a way of speaking. It's not physically reflected, not like light. So the ego feels aware. It's not only I, but it's an aware I. It's an aware I. So in artificial intelligence, when you endow a robot with artificial intelligence, that also has a sense of integrity. It can distinguish itself from its environment. So it behaves as if it has an ego. So you can even say that the robot has an ego. But then ego of the robot is not a conscious ego. There is no reflection of consciousness there. The robot does not actually feel like us, I, though it behaves like us. In behavior, ego, intellect, memory, all are evident in the robot's activity, if it's a sophisticated device with artificial intelligence and so on. Notice, intelligence, memory, ego, mind, all these can be replicated by computer science today. All these can be replicated. This alone should force modern philosophy of mind to accept that consciousness is not mind. This problem is not very clear. We studied the philosophy of mind in some detail at Harvard in the philosophy department there, and I saw again and again this underlying confusion of consciousness and mind, and leading to many problems. Many of the papers were vitiated by this. A simple insight, a difference between consciousness and mind, would actually solve many of the problems in philosophy. But now you'll be forced to accept consciousness and mind are not the same. Why will you be forced? Here, clear example. Your the robots in say the Google self-driving car, or the artificial intelligence is being created at IBM and other places, and Facebook and other places. They will replicate all functions of the mind which we just read about. Already memory, all our these smart devices have memory. Whatever the devices we are using now, plenty of memory, better than us. They have intellect. What is artificial intelligence? Buddhi. The ability to take decisions and compute and take decisions, yes. Much better than us. Already Kasparov was defeated by Deep Blue. That is buddhi. Mind, the ability to process information, consider. That is also developed by the something like that is going on in the computer, in the program itself. And a kind of proto-ego. Ego in the sense, the ability to distinguish the robot itself from its environment. Otherwise, no robot can function. If it has a clear sense of its own boundaries, what I am apart from the rest. And yet, here is the clear thing, which is obvious to everybody, and yet nobody acknowledges it. None of this is accompanied by an inner first-person experience of I am, I think, I understand, I remember. No. There is nothing going on in there in terms of conscious experience in the smartest AI-powered robot. Nothing. Though it can duplicate in behavior all our mental activities. So the mental activities and consciousness are different. You feel in the inner awareness, that reflected consciousness, when you think, when you remember, when you take a decision. The robot also remembers, thinks, takes a decision, has no inner awareness. In you, there's a light on in the room. In the robot, the room is working, but it is a dark room. You say, how are you so confident that there is no consciousness in the robot? Ask around. AI people, the designers in Google and Facebook and IBM, are they claiming that their machines and programs are conscious? Nobody claims. None of the experts will ever claim that our products are conscious. So far. Consciousness and mind are different. These definitions make it very clear. All of these things, what we just read, ego, memory, with all the definitions, make it clear that ego, memory, intellect, mind, these are all objective processes. You are aware of them. That which is aware of these processes is consciousness. They shine in the light of consciousness. The Upanishad says, Tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam. That consciousness shining, all of these are shining. What are all these? Mind, memory, ego, intellect, the pranas, the body. They all are revealed. Not so in a robot. The robot lacks reflected consciousness. If you know it lacks, you just said it lacks consciousness. No, this Atman, Brahman is everywhere, even in that robot. It's there. But that reflected consciousness is not there. And therefore, that inner feeling of I am this. This Vyavaharika Jiva, what we just read now, 73, very important. Distinction between a robot and us. In us, we can be considered as biological robots. What's the difference between us and a mechanical robot? In us, there is a Vyavaharika Jiva, transactional being, transactional sentient being, who is capable of being bound and of being released, of seeking spiritual liberation. The robot has nothing like that going on there. It's a machine which can extraordinarily well imitate our functions of thinking, feeling. Even recently, the mathematician Marcus Sator, he wrote a book about artificial intelligence creativity. People used to think the last barrier is people who do not distinguish between mind and consciousness. They give poor arguments like this. No, the consciousness means creativity. Nonsense. Totally non-conscious robot can create. Marcus Sator, he showed me examples. You cannot distinguish literature written by an author and by artificial intelligence. Poetry, art, actual art, design. Can you distinguish, is this human, which is the human being and which is the robot? You cannot distinguish. Creativity is not unique to human minds. A robot can be creative also. All of these are objective functions of the antakarana, which is a material thing. We just saw it is made of 5 elements. But somehow these 5 elements reflect consciousness, and this comes alive as a transactional jiva, a sentient being. I am Sarvapriyananda. Not so in the robot. But you see, if the material 5 elements can reflect consciousness, so why can't the robot's inner, the program reflect consciousness? Not yet. We don't know exactly where is the difference, but not yet. Swamiji, Hari Om, curious to know what's the intermesh of various nadis. Not yet. Nadis have not yet come. They are in the Sthula Sharira. Nadis will be there. They'll be mentioned later on. In deep sleep, is there no reflected consciousness? There is, but it is not active. The reflected consciousness becomes active in the Vijnanamaya Kosha, where for the first time it is evident. Without the subtle body, the reflected consciousness will not be evident. Deepa says, Pranams Maharaj, you said you want the cookie are present. Ego comes and says, I want. What does it mean, want and cookie are present? Are those present in awareness? How can want be present? No, want comes from the mind. Cookie information has come from the eyes, which see the cookie outside in the world. In the mind, you have this wanting coming. The information of the cookie has been brought by the eyes. And in the mind, the storehouse, the chitta, the desire has been brought out, that it is a nice thing. And a vasana arises. Now, another function of the mind is ego. It will come and what does it do? It comes and says, I want cookie. What are you? You're pure awareness, which is aware of all of the goings on, that the drama is going on. Ego is doing its ego thing. The mind is doing its mind thing. The sense organs are doing their thing. Memory is providing its past experiences. Drama is going on. Ego converts the big I to small I. Very nicely said. Ego converts the big I to small I. Very nicely said. Let me quickly look at the raised hands here.
Pranam Maharaj, I will ask you a question after hearing Professor Timal Sinha on the Shaivism. When he, at the end of the program, where he said that we believe in not jumping, but we want to enjoy both sides. And also with your question answer, the last question answer session, the last two questions that you said, because we are so comfortable in our lives here that we just don't know how to take the next jump. So here my question is, with what he said about you were mentioning about the Drishti Shrishtivad, with the Anirvachaniya Khati, will that help with the Mithyatvam of the world?
Okay, that's a very complicated question.
Sorry, it's bothering me so much after.
Let me just give you a little hint on this. What I mentioned at the end, what is going on in Kashmiri Shaivism actually? You will say, what is going on? It's another darshan, another philosophy? No. As a darshan, as a philosophy, it doesn't stand. With all respect to all Kashmiri Shaivas, and it just falls apart at the first blow. That's why it is never taken seriously as a philosophy. It never enters into debates with, say, Advaita Vedanta and all. It can't stand. What they have done is, they have imported you'll see now, what we have defined as mind and intellect, they've imported the activities of the mind and the intellect into the ultimate reality.
Yeah, that I saw.
It is called Prakasha Vimarsha Swarupa. The ultimate reality is not only consciousness, but it is a self-consciousness. It is aware of itself. And that enables them to do a lot of things. But that aware of itself, they have put two things together which are incompatible. So it is a logical impossibility.
But isn't it what is our problem now? That because we are so comfortable with this life in North America.
Correct. It's not just North America. We are so comfortable with the life in a body as a body-mind complex, lifetime after lifetime. So our tendency is to try to preserve a little bit of this also. So we are more comfortable with a philosophy which allows us to retain some semblance of being an individual being, separate, functioning, able to retain individual functionality. Swami Vivekananda used to make fun of this. He would say, individuality, you are not individuals yet. It's only when you are the absolute, that is the only individual possible. Until that time, we are like work in progress, continuous change only. So Then what is going on in Kashmiri Shaivism? What is the real beauty of Kashmiri Shaivism? The real beauty is this, that you'll remember towards the end I commented, if you take a phenomenological account of the experiences of spiritual practitioners, all the visions they have, the practices they do, the various supernatural, extraordinary experiences, mystical experiences they have, and then try to give a philosophy which unites all of this. That is Kashmiri Shaivism. Would you agree? And Timal Sinha said, Swamiji, you put it better than even I could.
Yes.
It is a mass of upayas. Look at the difference. Advaita Vedanta, you're puzzled. What is the way? We keep on asking and hammering on. It doesn't seem to be a way. It just seems to be a fact which is told to us. That's it, finished. What is the way? If you ask what is the way to Advaita Vedanta will reply, consider the question you are asking. You are you. Suppose you are Anuradha. You are asking, so in what way can I become Anuradha? What answer can I give you? You are Brahman. What is the way to become Brahman? If you're saying that I am Brahman, but I don't see how, I'm confused, I think something else entirely, I'm a body mind, then I can show you a way of dissolving that error. But I can't show you a way of becoming Brahman because you already are. Whereas in Kashmiri Shaivism, there is no end to methods. As he said, it's a mass of upayas. There are endless methods. Take up a single text, Vijnana Bhairava, 112 very sophisticated methods of meditation. Each one by itself can take you to enlightenment. Shambhava Upay, Shakta Upay, Anava Upay, Anupay. These are sets of techniques to help you to attain enlightenment. So that is the approach of Kashmiri Shaivism. It starts with the spiritual seeker. It is a very effective path methodology. Endless paths. Each one of your experiences is given some importance and put into part of the whole structure. It is given a place in the structure. Oh, you had this experience. You had a vision of this kind of Kali. Next is that kind of Kali. Ultimately, you will get Shiva vision and be identified with it. Things like that, step by step, multiple, very minute differentiation of spiritual experiences. And it gives serious impact, a serious place and regard to each of those. Advaita Vedanta, did you see it? Yes, it's an object, forget it. What saw it? Advaita Vedanta is, as he says, it's like taking a rocket ship. I saw this. You saw it, right? I saw this amazing vision. You saw it, right? Yes. Then it's an object. What is the one which was seeing? That's what Advaita is interested in. So Advaita takes you to the heart of the problem. So Kashmiri Shaivism has a great beauty of its own, no doubt about it. It's the way of a sadhaka, a dedicated spiritual practitioner. That's why Professor Arindam Chakravarti told me, if you want to understand the various visions of Sri Ramakrishna and the various practices that he undertook, you will be able to understand it much better through Kashmiri Shaivism than through Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta will explain only a little part of what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. The rest of it, I saw mother like this, I practiced like that, I heard that sound, I saw this light. These are all very nicely described in Kashmiri Shaiva texts. They're all real. How real are they? They're as real as this, what we are experiencing now.
So what will be the way for the mithyatvam to be like really?
Okay, hold on to that question. That will we will discuss in time. Next.
Thank you.
Good evening, Swamiji. I wanted to ask a question. So if, is it true that, like, do I understand it correctly that, let's say, in order for Brahman to experience Maya as, like, Brahman needs to have like a subtle body and the instruments to perceive it and interact with it. Is that the right type of thinking?
Yes, but remember, when you say Brahman needs these things, what are these
not
things?
needs, but sort of like if he wishes to, sort of.
Right.
To.
But remember, what are these things? What is the mind? What is an intellect? What is the prana? All of these instruments, they are nothing other than Brahman.
Yes.
Ultimately, yeah. So Brahman does not really need anything outside of itself.
But in a way, like to play this game, right?
Yeah.
To be part of the game, to enjoy the game, and therefore, like when like the ultimate enjoyment is essentially being becoming Jivan Mukta, right?
Right.
Therefore, kind of is that the whole sort of purpose of the jiva? Is that
You're
to
right.
provide Brahman with a great experience in the game?
Yes, you're right. Swami Turiyananda ji in one place, he says, there's a book called Jivan Mukta Sukha Prapti about the life of Swami Turiyananda. And he says the whole problem was solved. He was a great non-dualist, but he said, I was not satisfied with the idea that Brahman is somehow in bondage and somehow gets out of bondage and gets liberation. Why at all? But when I heard of this concept of Jivan Mukti, free in the midst of all this appearance, then I said, yes, this is a worthwhile goal. To enjoy the bliss of Jivan Mukti, Brahman plays this, the Absolute plays this game of the relative. That is, it's not, philosophically, it won't satisfy a hardcore logician, but it has a certain poetic justice of its own. Poetic appeal.
Why not logical?
Logically, why would an absolute even want something? How could an even absolute want anything? Even to project, a relative universe. How is it any better than, how is being a Jivan Mukta any better than being an infinite existence consciousness place?
Isn't it? It's the same question as why Maya, or kind of why
exactly.
that?
Exactly.
All right, there is. You cannot answer that.
Right. And I never found this answer, but personally, I stumbled, by thinking about it, I stumbled upon a very simple and elegant answer to the question of why at all of this. The answer I got was, what are the options? Either Brahman has to project itself in a relative way or not project itself. These are the only two options. And that's what it is doing. When there is creation and existence and life, it is projecting itself. When there is pralaya, the cosmic dissolution, and deep sleep every day, it is withdrawing the projection. These are the only two options that poor Brahman has. And it's serving the full menu to you. If it did not do anything at all, it was completely blank, you could have accused it of, you are the absolute, do something. Then it can do this, the relative world, or it can withdraw the relative world. Both of it it's doing. We have no cause for complaint. From an Advaitic perspective, as long as it is Brahman and you know that you are the absolute, it's perfectly all right. You are safe. There is no harm done anywhere, not to yourself. An enlightened person also knows, even the ones in ignorance, even the ones who are weeping and crying and suffering, they're also safe in an ultimate sense. Right now, there is of course suffering and pain. In an ultimate sense, they are safe. Everybody is safe in an ultimate sense, because you are nothing other than Brahman. All right, let's end on that happy note.
Thank you.
Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.